Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And next week we actually have a patch coming for the game with some changes to Into the Abyss that I think are pretty good. They are going to increase the rewards for all tiers, but especially I would say for the lower tiers that is very good news. And normally they are going to increase the drop rates in such a way that you have, if not a 100% chance, at least a very high chance to get drops in every cache in the 3 rooms from an abyssal site, because there's nothing more frustrating than to run a site and to have like 1, 2, sometimes even 3 empty caches. You're very unlucky when you have that, but it does feel quite frustrating. And upping the drop rates I think is a good idea. For me personally, the way I would look at it is that I would like to be able to earn and make my own Triglavian stuff by running the lower tier sites, so that I can then get a Triglavian ship ready and start using that for the higher tier content, because I don't want to use my Gila in there, but maybe if I can, well, I wouldn't say easily, but with a decent amount of work without too much grinding, get the skills and make myself a Triglavian ship and some fittings, and perhaps that would incentivize me to run the Abyss more and maybe to go into higher tiers, because I've just earned enough in order to risk that ship in there. At the moment, yeah, it's still exploration for me. I'm definitely making a good amount of ISK from the drops there. Anyways, we are here for the market, and as always we're going to start with some plex and stuff at 140. Like that. Let's get started here with plex, and maybe we'll start with the chart. You can clearly see that at the bottom is has been formed, and today's daily average price is up to 3 million ISK all of a sudden, selling in JITA for 3,142,000 ISK, and the buyers are above 3 million as well in JITA station. If you take a look at the player owned trade hubs, sellers still at 3.1 million, buyers above 3 million, and that's even 4 jumps out in Matista, which is a little bit weird, but yeah, there is still this competition for player business that does happen when it comes to the player owned trade hubs, but pretty obvious the sales are over, and here is the effect on that. I hope that last week and the week before that you did spot this opportunity to stack up on a plex, especially if you don't have any plex investments. I do have a lot of plex ready from a massive gift that I received quite a while ago, but I still held on to that. That's basically my hedge against inflation, and last week was the right time I think to buy some plex, and this massive increase here all of a sudden I think is going to prove that. For my personal horizon, I would say look towards a winter release, especially if there is stuff like small stargates that can be quite interesting, and the propaganda towers, perhaps even a winter expansion. That would really be the time to take a close look at plex and try to grab that sell opportunity. But the buy opportunity, we had a pretty obvious one in the last month or so, and especially in the last couple of weeks. We could clearly buy plex for less than 3 million. That's already gone. Be ready for the increased prices at this point. Next up, we'll take a look at the multiple pilot train certificates. Same thing here. Managed to get just below a billion ISK, and I think it would have been a good idea to buy there. Obviously, looking back at it on the first initial sale, we went below 900 million ISK, and I'm pretty sure that I said that if you have a long enough horizon and if you have the patience for multiple pilot train certificates, you could probably buy a couple of them. Never go crazy with the volumes, because you can clearly see that these are declining as well, and after these sales will have recovered, we will be talking about probably less than 100 to be sold every day. So buying hundreds of them is probably not the best idea, but as an investment, depending on what you're capable of, this would have of course been a pretty massive one at 900 million ISK. And again, I would have the longer horizon. Take a look at what's happening in the winter. The potential of 1.5 billion definitely exists. We can see that right here in October, November. So these are now selling for 1 billion and 75 million, so almost 1.1 billion, and the buyers have gone above a billion as well for the multiple pilot train certificates. An outlier here, skill extractors. You can see that plex has made a jump up, skill extractors made a jump down. I saw an ad, I think it was on Twitter, was it, or was it just on the launcher? I'm not sure anymore, but there is a sale happening for skill extractors. So this is going to make a bit of a difference, of course, between plex, skill extractors, and potentially skill injectors as well. Quite an interesting move from CCP, but these are currently selling for around 300 million ISK, and the buyers are coming in at 295. So it's immediately a bottom. And again, if you want to make those investments, if you still need to make those investments, I would definitely look at grabbing a couple of skill extractors for around 300 million ISK. You can see the potential of almost 400 definitely exists at the right time. And here again, December, January, so look for that winter spike if you are making these investments. Next up, we have the large skill injector that is also bottoming out at 740 million on the chart, currently selling for 760 million ISK almost, buyers at 743. Again, if you have the ISK, if you still need to make those investments, I would have gone for plex, and I think that, you know, this is going to be the easiest one to unload just because of the massive volumes, the different uses that it has. But if you still have and want like a bigger investment, take a look at the large scale injectors. 1 year low point just a couple of weeks ago. We're still below large scale injectors, we're still probably below 750 million for your purchase. And here again, the potential 820, almost 830 million ISK does exist here. So it's pretty sharp rush down, and this is only going to get, you know, extended a little bit, I think, with this the sale happening for skill extractors. But if we look at the rest, here is plex going back up, here are the multiple part trading certificates going back up. It's almost inevitable that the large scale injectors will go up with that inflation on plex as well at some point. So I am personally seeing this as a massive opportunity to invest in large scale injectors. Next up, the small skill injectors, I think telling the exact same story, except that it's already ahead by probably a couple of days. Let's hope for a couple of days, as we had a bottom of around 150 million ISK. And now we are already back up at 155 for the sellers, 150 for the buyers. And you can see the chart here forming that bottom. You know, maybe a little bit delayed from a plex, but it's definitely very close to that as we are starting to go back up here as well. So interesting market. I think you still have a couple of opportunities, but if you want to make those investments, if you have the ISK lying around, remember two things: don't go too crazy with the volumes, but also don't wait too long anymore, because plex tends to be the indicator here. And that one is going back up. It won't last for very long anymore. Next up, we still have the daily alpha injector. So pretty obvious to see this decline in price being due to sales down to less than 50 million ISK, and we're already back above 55 on the chart. 58 if we disregard this one seller order, 58.5 for the sellers and 51 for the buyers. So to me, all of this does strongly indicate that this large scale injector decline will not last, that this is a bottom that has formed, and that again, for that longer term, you are probably looking at an investment opportunity. Next up, let's move on to some minerals at 820. There we go. And as always, we'll start with titanium. That is, of course, not good news, seeing that continued decline on the 5-day moving average and the chart playing with 4.8 ISK for titanium. Let's take a look at the sales in JITA. 485 for the sellers, and the buyers are coming in at 463. And despite the price going well below 5 ISK now, 1.5 billion, 2 billion, 1.3 billion, another billion here coming in. Yeah, people are still dumping massive amounts of titanium. Unfortunately for minerals and Tech One, I think it's going to be the same story. It is summertime. It's also the World Cup. That probably has at least some effect on the amount of time that people spend in the game. And as a result, we just have too much production, not enough destruction, and we have very low mineral prices. Do these create a buy opportunity? Yes, but you are dependent on like a massive war to break out in Nelsik, and I'm not sure if the political situation is ripe for that there, or potentially, of course, a CCP intervention. As I've said, there are some potentially crazy theories of mine that could yield higher mineral prices on the next release. For instance, if CCP decides that the new line of structures that are smaller than the M structures only cost minerals, that is potentially a way to have an impact on the mineral price, but that's definitely conjecture and I would not take too much of a gamble on that. Here is Pyrite continuing basically to meander at this 1 year low point of around 4 ISK. The sellers are coming in at 404 and the buyers at 380. Extremely low prices, but you can still see billions of units coming in here as well. And then from 414 down to 404, it's still 300 million, 400 million, 700 million units. So this is still way overproduced for what is being used in the game at the moment. Next up, we have Mexalon, and that is definitely, on the one hand, the bad news. It shows that it's a general situation in the entire game. But potentially, if you do want to make that mineral investment, I would look at Mexalon here. We are diving down to less than 65 ISK at this point, which is close to a 1 year low point. Sellers are at 66 and buyers are at 60.74. And if you look at the volatility of this chart relative to the entire last year, and you know that this is at the moment, that is the one big gamble. Will CCP not intervene? Then this is at the moment the bottleneck for nullsec, and if a war happens, if you want to get that war profiteering going, then I would look at Mexalon investments as close as possible to 60 ISK. That's entirely below the chart. That would be a very good price to grab it at, and the buyers are coming in here at 60, almost 61 ISK, and you can see that they are trying to buy some decent volumes at these prices as well. So this is very bad news for current miners, but I told you guys last week, this is what's happening. There's just too much mining happening in the game compared to the destruction, and as a result we do have Mexalon breaking straight through every barrier and currently being bought for almost 61 ISK, which is very, very low. I would say this is probably the one opportunity, a bit more specific in my opinion compared to titanium, compared to pyrite, which are also at really low prices. But we know from experience that Mexalon is that nullsec bottleneck, that if they have to ramp up their production, they need to import Mexalon from HiSec at the moment. And that does mean that we will see a price reaction, or we have a much higher chance of seeing a price reaction that will make us some ISK if you can buy at this price point. So for me, this one is very interesting. I might even make a small investment in that myself. Next up, we've got Isogen, pretty much in the same boat as Pyrite, is being massively overproduced for an entire year straight. It's trying to bottom out, but at what price? It's at 28.5 ISK for the sellers and 27.5 for the buyers. And still the volumes coming in the last 2-3 days here, hundreds of millions still being brought to the market, just way more than we can absorb. For Noxium last week, we had this breakthrough at 300 ISK a couple of weeks ago that has just continued, and look at that. This is what I was mostly afraid of, and that is the one warning that I should give you guys. I feel like Mexalon is, you know, that's the one gamble that I would take. But if you look at Pyrite, we're hesitating around 4 ISK, just as we hesitated for a very long time around 300 ISK for Noxium. Once that is broken and the market looks for a new region in which to trade, it can go down quite violently. And so we've had the first spur down towards 250, and now we're just breaking straight through that. People are tired of waiting. They're selling Noxium for 257, and the buyers are saying, oh really, we're going that low? Okay, 238 for the buyers, well below 250 ISK. And for like the whole last year, 300 ISK was very well defended by the market, but that psychology has just basically been broken. And then look out below, we could go even lower, and it's really a massive step down from staying above 300 ISK now, trading in the 240 to 260 range. And here in the last couple of days we fell even more, as probably, you know, even more impatient people just started selling straight to the buy orders, pushing those prices down even more. Quite a crazy situation, but definitely a good warning as to why I'm hesitant to call a lot of these low prices in minerals an investment opportunity. I like Mexalon because of what we know happening in nullsec, and because of the volatility, the 1 year low point here. For all the others, well, the Noxium scenario is still looming in my opinion. Next up we have nullsec. Here is Zydrine continuing the descent as well, heading for 500 ISK, 538, 539 for the sellers and 473 for the buyers. Quite a wide spread, buyers below 500 ISK. Again, we have that same risk here. We might bounce off of 500 a little bit on some investments, but if we break that, look out below. 400 to 500 might become the new playground for prices of Zydraine. So this is, in my opinion, looks very enticing, and it might be an opportunity, but always keep the Noxium further decline here in mind when it comes to investing in this. Definitely, as always, don't put all your eggs in this potential basket, but if you want to start your Zydraine investments on this chart, I definitely don't blame you, but keep in mind what's happening with Noxium as well. For Megasite, we have a little bit more resistance here, trying to defend 600 ISK. Sellers are at 620, buyers are at 600 ISK. So here we do have potentially a bottom forming, but I have to again say that same warning. We just see what's happening with Zydraine, that one is just continuing to decline straight through the 600 mark down to 500. Who knows if Megasite might not decide to break through 600 and start trading at 550 or something like that. To stay a little bit closer to the Zydraine prices. So yeah, the overabundance of minerals I think is pretty clear on all of these charts. Morphite is also now being oversupplied and is coming pretty close to the previous bottom, so potentially pretty close to an investment opportunity as well. So that decline in price is a bit more slow and steady. Sellers coming in at 8,600, buyers at 8,400. I would prefer to see buyers a bit closer to 8,000 before I actually pull the trigger on Morphite myself. I think it could still happen, considering the entire mineral market is basically in massive decline at the moment. Trying to time the bottom is always difficult. If you would look for starting out some mineral investments, I would potentially start to look at Morphite, Mexalon, and if you really want to, well, Zydraine is obviously sharply down at a 1 year low point as well. But Mexalon, my number one, Morphite as a number two potentially. Just have the patience for a buy order for less than 8,500, I would say, and then maybe Zydraine, but that one feels a bit risky considering what we're seeing on this chart. Next up, let's move on to our PI at 17 minutes. And try not to hit the microphone too much. Let's get started here with broadcast nodes. Kinda like it. Well, that is the big gamble. We do know that CCP is working on structures, replacement for the jump bridges, some other types of structures that they want people to basically use in a fire and forget way, I think. Just very fast to deploy, but also very easy to destroy. Will that be used a lot? I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. Is there a use for those new structures? That's one thing. You know, how popular will they be? I know that the propaganda towers, I can see that be very popular. But if it's just something that that is for like storage or things like that, I think people have that pretty much covered with alts and ships and things like that. So popularity of that is still up in the air. And then will they ask advanced PI materials for those not so large structures? That's a little bit the question as well. That's the gamble you would take if you're trying to invest preparing for the new structure. So broadcast nodes, for instance, does look pretty good on the chart, heading for less than 2.1 on the 5-day moving average, 2.15 for the sellers and 2 million for the buyers. Definitely a decently low price for broadcast nodes if you look at the entire chart here. Potentially, if you want to start making advanced PI material investments, this is looking pretty good for some broadcast nodes. Construction blocks next, continuing the descent back, maybe starting to be a touch below average, below 12,000 is on the chart. 12,200 for the sellers, that's probably around average. 11,300 for the buyers, that's probably a bit below average. Is that a buy opportunity? 11,300, that's around here on the chart. Maybe if you really want to make that investment, again, have the patience for a buy order, but that's pretty wide spread, and on the entire chart, that's pretty low. So you could definitely grab some construction blocks, I think. Consumer electronics continuing the hesitation around 13,000 ISK here. Do I want to stay at 15k? Apparently not. Do I want to go to a new bottom? Not just yet either. So it's 13,800 for the sellers. Definitely still a pretty good price. Buyers 12,800. They are trying to drive the price back down. Will they succeed? I think if they do, that we have even more momentum to go to a real bottom. like that, close to 11,000 ISK on the buyer side or something like that. It's not that many buy orders that need to be grabbed in order to achieve that. So I would wait for consumer electronics. You can see that the pressure is on because the buyers are just not willing to pay that much. Coolants, very interesting situation here, all of a sudden breaking straight through the 10,000 ISK mark and 11,200 for the sellers. Best price we've had in probably 6 months for coolants, so you can definitely sell that. 10,400 for the buyers. Buyers above 10,000 is quite interesting as well. Shows some pretty strong demand for fuels, I would say. Enriched uranium also going back up, but this one is difficult to read considering where we come from early on the year, a bottom below 10,000 ISK and then now slowly going back up. So maybe considering the coolant increasing price, that there is some more demand for fuels and thus for fuel related PI materials. 11,500 for the sellers, 10,600 for the buyers. I'd say, considering the entire chart here in the last 6 months, okay to sell, not as good as the coolant uptick though. Integrity response drones also under pressure today towards 2.5 million. Buyers are below 2.5 million, sellers 2.65 million. So here I'd love to see a more pronounced opportunity that gets closer to this point, 2.2 million or something like that. But if you absolutely want to, integrity response drones are pretty affordable. Mechanical parts continuing to stay above 10,000 ISK, which is not bad. Almost 11,000 for the sellers and 10,200 for the buyers. That's pretty important. Those buyers willing to pay more than 10k, supporting higher prices. So again, mechanical parts, coolants, those typical PI materials for fuels making a bit of a comeback and managing to defend that for now. Nuclear reactors slowly going up to 100,000 ISK. So I actually bought at these bottom prices. I made an investment. We'll have to wait for me personally for like 120, 130k before I sell. But now 95,000 ISK for the sellers and 88,000 ISK for the buyers. You can still grab them below 90,000 ISK. And I would say if you still want that nuclear reactor investment, you could still gamble on that. Organic mortar applicators continuing to meander between 1 and 1.1 million ISK. Buyers 1.06. So that's still, that's okay, but it's not too pronounced a buy opportunity. We've got the robotics, fuel related, staying above 100,000 ISK, so doing decently well, around average, I would say. 104 for the sellers, 97,700 for the buyers. Self-harmonizing power cores, again, it's a bit unfortunate. It's nothing too special. Are the buyers below 2 million ISK? No, they're actually at 2.1 million ISK, so I would say a bit too early. I would love to see a more pronounced buy opportunity, but who knows, it might not happen. Just like last year, where I just kept waiting for a better opportunity and eventually I just completely missed out on the bottom. So, be careful if you want that investment. Superconductors just staying a little bit below average, I would say, selling for 12k, buyers at 11.2k. The test cultures, I would love again to see another leg down, break through 8,000 ISK before I call on an investment opportunity. With the buyer still at 8,800, I would say no, I don't want to invest in test cultures at this point. And then finally the wetware mainframes, that is interesting. 1 year low point on a couple data points close to 2 million. Where are the buyers at? 2.2 million. Unfortunately, yeah, the investors are keeping a close eye on that, and it looks like we'll be bouncing back up to well above 2.2 million on average pretty soon here. So that's unfortunate. A couple of days ago we probably would have been able to grab some wetware mainframes very close to 2 million ISK, because all of that, as you can see, is 3 days ago. 86 here, 2 million exactly as I said. So this gap has been filled by new investors that spotted this opportunity couple of days ago. It's unfortunate, but that's really what you have to do if you want to make those investments. Keep that close eye on these prices. You need to check them every day if you want to have that those bottom prices, and that's exactly what we missed here in wetware mainframe. 3-4 days ago you'd been able to grab them for 2 million ISK, and that is not bad if you look at this entire chart. So PI, rife with opportunity, I would say. Interesting comeback of the fuel related PI materials, but you do need to keep a close eye on trying to grab the advanced PI materials at the right opportunities. And again, keep in mind, we're not sure at all that the next line of structures, which are smaller than what we have at the moment, will actually require PI as well. Stays a little bit of a gamble. Next up, the Tech 1 chips at 24.30. Let's take a look at these. And do I have mortar applicators? Yeah, okay, I didn't miss them. I thought for a second that it was removed from my list again. All right, Tech 1 chips. Here is the Apocalypse after managing a bit of a comeback to 140 million. I think, well, it's gonna be pretty bad. 138.5 for the sellers, 113 million for the buyers of a battleship, the Apocalypse. That is really very, very low. And look at the volumes here. 8 sold in a day, 8 sold in a day. It's just, you know, not in the meta. Tech 1 battleships, not happening at the moment. The Caracal, continuing the descent as well, heading for 8 million ISK. Sellers at 8.3, buyers at 7.8 million for the Caracal. This is exactly what I was talking about. Minerals are super cheap. People can make these Tech 1 ships at very low costs, but just there's not enough destruction in the game, especially in the Tech 1 ships, to absorb all of that. So we're just massively oversupplied across the board in that part of the economy. The catalysts also finally breaking and heading for 1 million ISK. Buyers coming in. The last one at a million ISK needs to be gone, but look at the oversupply compared to the demand here. And yeah, someone is willing to buy a lot of them for less than a million ISK, but it shows again that pressure from the minerals. The Drake, after reaching a bottom price of 37.5 million on the chart, makes a bit of a comeback, selling now for 41 million, buyers at 37 million. Pretty obvious here again that we are under pressure from the minerals. Ferox continuing to descend slowly below 40 million ISK, very close to 1 year low point, 39.4 for the sellers and 35.7 for the buyers. The Megatron, same story of course, continuing the decline as well. 130 on average, 132 for the sellers, 121 for the buyers. Look at the lack of buyers. That is so obvious here, the volumes. We're talking 30, 40 of them on a single day. Quite bad. The Oracle next. Now, after finding 60 million, there's a bit of an opportunity that people spot to actually buy some of them. So we have increased volumes, but at 1 year low prices. I don't blame you. 62 for the sellers, 57 for the buyers. And look at that in the last 24 hours. So it's 56 million. That can be back very quickly. It's the lack of demand that is sometimes crashing the prices down. And then of course you do have some investors that pull the trigger. The Raven breaking through the 140 mark, 137 all of a sudden for the sellers, 130 million for the buyers. Again, well below average. Retriever, same story, managed a little bit of a comeback with an anomalous data point here of 24.4 million, but yeah, we're staying well below 20 million now. 19 for the sellers and 17 for the buyers. Tempest, same story, bit of hesitation, but we're moving in the 130 to 140 mark, and at the tail end we're also still going down. Buyers coming in at 121, a bit more demand for the Tempest, and that is probably what is keeping this volatility alive. Otherwise we'd probably be looking at a Megatron chart as well. Thrasher, 1 year low point, heading for 800,000 ISK now, 843 for the sellers and 800,000 for the buyers. Look at the lack of demand. There's just nobody buying the Thrashers at the moment. It's really crazy, but this is the impact of the minerals and the current summer slump. The Tornado, same thing here, just breaking straight through 55 million ISK. You see a bit of more of an increased volume on the opportunity, but that's already dying down as well, and we're in danger of heading for 50 million now. 48 for the buyers, 54 for the sellers. If you ever wanted to fly a Tornado, which if I'm not mistaken was actually a player design that won out and is then brought in the game, it looks really amazing. Quite an interesting ship. It costs absolutely nothing now to grab yourself a Tornado. The Tristan, you know, managing to maintain, but it's well below 500,000 ISK, so it's not like it's expensive. The Venture actually breaking back up above 250,000 ISK, so somehow that one is still in the meta. For some reason, 310,000 for the Venture, which is a really good price. It's what I would make basically. And then the Vexor, after dumping down to 8.3 million, a little bit of a comeback, but only up to 9 million. So 9 for the sellers, 8.1 million for the buyers. Look at the lack of demand here again. It's pretty obvious. It's a little bit unfortunate if you are into that Tech 1 market, or if, you know, I still almost every week get mails from people that, you know, want to get into industry, and it is a massive part of the game. But, you know, at this point, it's really, really difficult. Not only are you competing with all the people that already have made the investments, that have the perfect blueprints, that have the routes, the reserves and everything to weather this kind of a storm. At this point, if as a new player you want to get in to industry on EVE Online, you're gonna start with Tech 1, and Tech 1 is so depressed that it's really just going to be a loss for you at this point. So yeah, I can't really recommend trying to jump into industry at this point. But on the other hand, if you make it through this summer as an industrialist and you come out on top through the summer here, you might just be a real industrialist in EVE Online as well. See it as a challenge, but know that it's basically the time of the year that's making it very difficult to get started with industry in the Tech 1 market right now. Let's move on to Tech 2 at 3020. 3020. And here the story is a little bit different, of course, because last year CCP did cause quite a bit of havoc in the Tech 2 production chains by removing the completely passive Tech 2 material gathering from Moon mining. That is what happened here in October with the new Moon refineries, where you grab a chunk that it explodes and then you can mine for those two Tech 2 based materials. All of that has created, well, a little bit of instability and definitely higher prices in the Tech 2 market. And so at the moment, what I like to do in Tech 2 is to trade actively in the smaller ships, so I don't have to risk too much ISK, but I need clear buy opportunities, and it's very hard to find those at the moment. The Ares, for instance, is still hovering at 32-33 million ISK, and we would need to see that decline massively before I'd say, yeah, we should take the gamble on the Ares. So that's really what I'm going to focus on here. The Cerberus, very interesting. I think last week I said that maybe I would invest in some Cerberi, even though we are not clearly on a lower average, but because of upcoming events potentially in EVE Online, that might be a good investment. And it turns out that I was right already. So if last week you did buy a couple of Cerberus, you could have probably bought them for around 280 million. They're already selling for 420 million ISK, and then the buyers coming in at 300 million ISK. You already make quite a bit of ISK on that quick trade. Now this is a pretty massive gamble, in the sense that it requires a CCP intervention. It requires a new event from CCP that is tailored towards these good cruisers, which they often are. So that is basically, I think, what's been happening here with the Cerberus. All of a sudden more demand, and I'm assuming that it is because of the you've got new, what is the latest video with in development with CCP Antiquarian, where they explain that there will be a new event based around Minmatar freedom. You go after destroying slavers and things like that, and if it is in line with previous events, Cerberus is going to be a great ship for that, which I think is what accounts for this massive increase in price all of a sudden. So that's a gamble I didn't take but should have taken. The Claw next, continuing to meander towards 30 million ISK, buyers at 27.8 million. Maybe that is still just like last week. It's continuing the descent. The buyers are still at a pretty reasonable gap between themselves and the sellers. So if you absolutely want a tick to gamble, you could take the Claw. I would like it to be more pronounced. The Crow here staying at 32.5 million. You know, I don't like it. We'd need to hit 27.5 on the chart before we decide on investing there. Crusader, same thing, well above 30 million. That's a no for me. Heretic dropping off quite sharply here, down towards 70 million ISK, where the buyers at 71.5, sellers at 74.2. It is a sharp drop off, maybe a pretty big maybe for this one. It would be interesting if we actually managed to break through 70 million on the chart here and have buyers at 65, something like that. But perhaps it has that momentum. The Hound, after breaking through 30 million, is sharply up back to 40 million for the sellers, 33 for the buyers. So here we had a small opportunity, but again, not as pronounced as I would like to see it. The Ishtar going down to 250 million ISK, 265 for the sellers, 245 for the buyers. Perhaps I do like where it is landing compared to the entire chart. Again, keep an event in mind. We know that the Cerberus has already, that trigger's already been pulled by the market, but the Nemesis is, no, the Nemesis, goddamn, the Ishtar is generally also a really strong ship for these types of events. So perhaps this could be an investment opportunity for the Ishtar. Feels pretty risky. Again, I would also love to see these charters break through 250 and then see buyers coming in at like 220, something like that. That would have been a pretty obvious investment opportunity, but because of all of the changes to the Tech 2 market at the moment, it's been very difficult to actually find those. The Manticore breaking back out and never really reaching 30 million ISK, back up to 37.5. So this is, I don't think that this is worth an investment on this small jump, and neither is it the risk unless we really break through all of these averages. Nemesis, same thing, staying well above 30 million. That's a big no. I want to see this on the chart break down to 25 million on the chart. That means you're buying them for 22, 23, something like that. That's a definite buy opportunity. That's still a big no. Bonifex, way too stable at the higher end, so that's a no for me as well. Purifier breaking back down, but again, only back to its previous average and still well above 30 million ISK. Where are the buyers at? 31.1. Again, that's a no for me. The Raptor slowly going down, but well above 30. Saber actually taking off. So you can see 70 million was possible for the Saber, currently selling for 85 million. That does put the Heretic in a nice, interesting position. You can buy Heretics for close to 70 million ISK, and then on another Saber breakout like that one, potentially there is some ISK on that downtrend there. The Stiletto just staying stable above 30 million, so I don't like it. The Stork feels like a big gamble on a command destroyer, very low volumes, but we are talking 70 million for these ships. And then the Taranis is below 30 million ISK. Buyers at 27. Yeah, I'd say you could. You are probably dependent on some nullsec action where an interceptor fleet is lost, and then all of a sudden people want the cheapest interceptor for as a preparation for that eventuality. Because of the lack of buyers here, I would say that you could try to grab a couple of cheap Taranis's close to 27 million ISK. Next up, let's take a look at the Tech 3 market at 3650. And let's see if there are any opportunities here. Yes, there are. Oof, and this was actually what I was a little bit afraid of. Look at the volume increase. Look at the decrease in price down to 30 million ISK. I was constantly saying, yeah, this looks actually pretty reasonable. We don't have crazy oversupply. These are reasonable prices for confessors. But keep in mind, don't put all your eggs in that one basket right now, because you never know what happens, and that oversupply spectre was looming, and that must be what happened here. We went down from 35, 36 million to 30 million on average. And is it on a massive dump? Look at that, 106, 81, 35, some of the highest numbers we've seen all of a sudden, and someone has just put down quite a few of them at 30.80 million ISK. Buyers are pretty much at that price as well. And so that is that oversupply spectre that I felt was still looming across the Tech 3 market. I would say that this is a pretty decent buy opportunity. If you want to grab a couple of these confessors at 30 million, I think you are making a good deal. Keep it in mind though, 206 coming, someone was willing to dump all of them at buy order prices to drive the price back down. So don't go too crazy, who knows what else they still have in store for us. But personally, grabbing maybe 3 of them, keep it at 100 million on this one opportunity and see what happens next. I think that's not a bad idea. Hecate, after managing to stay above 40 million for a little bit, is back under pressure. 36 for the sellers, 34 for the buyers. And again, it's not too crazy, but from last week and the week before that, we're up 73, 80 here. The volumes are still starting to go up, and maybe the Tech 3 market is starting to also feel that summer slump. Production, generally, people that produce in EVE Online, they tend to have their routines, they tend to keep going in the summer, but it's the destruction that's gone. And as a result, we do have bigger numbers coming in, more supply, less demand, and lower prices. So Hecate under pressure, volumes slowly going up. Confessor, pretty big dump, driving the price back down all of a sudden. Let's see what the Jackdaw is doing. Trying to hold on, but well below 40 million ISK at this point. And again, look at the volume increase. That is quite worrying to not see that be on the buyer side, and so not an increase in price. So we've got 63 here again, 38 for the sellers, 33.8 for the buyers. For me personally, I'm a little bit afraid of another confessor scenario coming in for the Hegeti, for the Jackdaw, just driving the price back down to 30 million all of a sudden. And then we've got the Zwepel that is hesitating, staying below 40 million, but slightly up. But here is the threat. 199 coming in at 33.8 million, 215 coming in at 33.8 million. Buyers are at 33. This is going to basically nail that price right here at 33 million. And then is there even more? That's the question. If you all of a sudden can dump 400 Zwepels on this market, you know, what else do you have in store for all of the others? So yeah, I would say on an opportunity like this, you could try to grab a couple of these confessors, but don't go too crazy, because oversupply specter. I told you guys in the last couple of weeks that this might happen, and here the confessor is the first one where it happened. For the Zwepel, it's also happening, although they're keeping it at 33 million, but in a hot summer we might actually see even more dumping coming in here. For the cruisers, let's take a look at that. Here is the Legion going back down to 160 million. Is it? Yeah, look, in the last 24 hours, 106 here, and then some people competing below that. Again, volumes all of a sudden, more ships coming in on the market. It's going to be a little bit more tricky to completely manipulate that, but you do get that feeling that there's at least one major party playing with this entire Tech 3 market at this point, and the potential for oversupply and these decrease in prices are very real. The Loki next, still holding at 200 million ISK, but here look at that, 468, 56 of them, that big supply coming in. Proteus 110 here, 60 here, down to 150 million ISK all of a sudden, with the buyers at 139. And then we've got the Tengu, breaking through the entire average here, starting to be very close to 1 year low points. So that's 140 on the chart, 145 for the sellers, 137 for the buyers. And look at that, 296, 230. I personally feel pretty lucky that I kept saying be careful in that Tech 3 market, because I feel like there is manipulation happening and oversupply could be happening as well. And I think that this week, especially here in the cruisers, we've seen some massive dumping. We're seeing the first sign in the confessor here as well. So keep a close eye on that. It's rife with opportunities. Tengu's at 145, that's a pretty massive decrease. Lower prices, 137, so you're buying them for less than 140 if you want to. I think you can. That is not bad. That is not bad. Again, don't buy 100 Tengu's all of a sudden. Not saying do that. Slow buying at the right time here, I think, can give you a very nice cache of Tech 3 ships, bought very cheaply, and have the patience for some Nulsic action. Might be way after the summer all of a sudden, but that's when we'll see the comeback. So slow buying in the Tech 3 market, and especially on something like what you're seeing here in the confessor, I would say is definitely a nice idea. But be careful, just like in the last couple of weeks. Oversupply, it could happen, and who knows how low we could actually go. So always be ready to lower your averages if even more ships get dumped on the markets. I'd say that that's going to be my strategy for Tech 3. I think I still have a couple of confessors lying around as well. Perhaps it's time to take a look at all of that. Yeah, I think I should. And then for the extra products, and this week at 43.15, we are going to take, we are going to take a look at the ice products this week. We already saw from PI that fuel has made quite a bit of a comeback. And with those increased PI prices, we can probably expect a little bit of upward pressure as well on the fuel prices. Let's see if this is indeed a general demand for fuel that has increased, and so if the prices for some of these isotopes, for instance, is up as well. Let's take a look at that. Here is heavy water actually going down in price, back on an average price of around 450. So that's 436 for the sellers, 398 for the buyers. Definitely coming from a decent period of higher prices, close to 600 ISK. So here back on average, and that's an actually decreased demand on more supply. That's a summer slump pattern that we're seeing here for heavy water. What's happening with helium isotopes? Well, if we look at all of this, we can clearly see an increase in price up to 1000 ISK in December, January. We managed to defend that for quite a bit, but we are on our way back down as well. Very interesting. 840 for the sellers, 800 ISK for the buyers. That's right here on the chart. Maybe a bit too early to say you could consider starting to buy these, but to me that is an interesting pattern here all of a sudden, and not what I expected. Here are the hydrogen isotopes, up in price to 1250 ISK, now giving back some ground. Increased volume, so more dumping, selling for 1081, buyers are at 1017. Okay, so this increase in price, more demand for fuel, I can understand that. This decrease here at the end is actually a bit worrying. If this is fuel related rather than isotope specific or ice mining specific, then be careful with what I said on the PI, like coolants, mechanical parts. They've got a bit of an increase in price, but if this actually indicates decreased demand, then that could change very rapidly. Liquid ozone is just basically stable at 100 ISK, an average price, not much to say here. The nitrogen isotopes, well, they're definitely at a high point above 900 ISK, and they're actually still staying there, but I'm seeing hesitation on some of these data points, so there is obviously some pressure on these as well. Oxygen isotopes, after a high point of 1500 ISK in March, also having to give back a little bit of ground and currently being sold for 1000 ISK. And then we've got the strontium that is still, well, really super cheap. I don't think that's used in fuels themselves. So this is very interesting. I'm seeing lower prices all of a sudden here in many of the isotopes. I'm seeing higher prices in the PI. So I'm actually going to add a quick look at the fuels themselves as well. Here are the helium fuel blocks. So that's that increase in price that we saw, you know, a bit more demand throughout the game. That makes a lot of sense with all of the refineries coming online. But here at the tail end, that is a bit worrying, breaking through 22,000 ISK. If that has momentum, be careful with those PI investments. That's what I would say. Hydrogen fuel box, definitely at a high point, but here again at the tail end, look at the pressure starting to form. Nitrogen fuel blocks, same thing, definitely an increase here in demand. February, March, April, right after the refineries, managed to maintain a price of 22,000 ISK for most of that time, but here at the tail end, you know, looking to go back down a little bit. And then the oxygen fuel block, same pattern here, February to April, massive increase in price, so probably increased demand. But here at the tail end, we are again playing with that 23,000 ISK barrier. Be careful, be careful. If the isotopes are an indicator, and if all of this is generally pointing to lower fuel demands, then I would be careful with anything to do with coolants here. That could switch around very quickly, in my opinion. I would try, if you have coolants, I am producing coolants, I am going to bring them to the market as soon as I can, because I think that this sell opportunity might not last. And when I was looking at this, when I was looking at uranium going back up, when I was looking at mechanical parts doing pretty well, I was like, okay, there's more demand for fuel, we're looking pretty good. Looking now at the ice products and at the fuels themselves, I would say be careful, because it looks to me like summer activity is actually decreasing demand for fuel at the moment, and that puts these in a pretty precarious situation, in my opinion. Anyways, that's going to be it for this week's EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I will see you next time.